Be strong.
Responds, asking for pardon, but she is addressing him. She points out that the person behind him is the renowned swordmaster Sir Javier Esrahan. Both Lloyd and Javier express surprise. She takes a seat in front of them and observes that it seems Javier has been troubled by marriage matters, suggesting that he must be too busy to think about marriage now. Javier queries how she knows that. She mentions that she observed it on her way here, noticing the construction of buildings she had never seen before and the development of clean roads in all directions. She remarks that he must be busy supervising all of that, given that she knows his goals. She indicates her intention to take her leave and rises from her seat. He refuses, requesting her to wait a minute, expressing his desire to talk to her for a while. He inquires if Namaran is currently facing any difficulties, such as a sudden influx of people. She complies, sits back down, and questions how he knows about it. He explains that around 4,000 refugees arrived in Namaran due to losing their homes in monster attacks, and according to his knowledge, someone brought them to Namaran. He curses internally, realizing that the barrier of Namaran is a spell designed to drain the life force of the people within it. The barrier was activated because the refugees fulfilled the required number of people for the activation of Canavero's magic. He reflects that despite efforts to gather everyone into their county, there were still refugees who reached Namaran, aligning with Cannavaro's plans as per the novel. He contemplates the grim outcome. If his plans proceed, thousands of Namaran's people will be sacrificed as offerings, and the Hell Knight, a harbinger of death, will be summoned. Considering the story's setting, he acknowledges that not even a high sword master can defeat a Hell Knight, as its existence is nearly equivalent to that of a god. This realization means he cannot prevent the annihilation of the entire area, and the situation is far worse than his initial concerns. Lloyd Frontera prepares for a work trip, and Javier approaches with a bucket filled with love letters. Lloyd questions why Javier isn't getting ready for the trip and what he has in the bucket. Javier responds that they are letters given to him by the ladies, and he plans to put them in his room first. Lloyd inquires about the content of the letters, and Javier casually mentions they are, of course, love letters. Javier comments that Lloyd didn't receive any, and Lloyd agrees. Javier places the bucket on the ground, takes out one letter, and offers it to Lloyd with a smile. Lloyd questions why Javier would give him something that belongs to him and urges him to get prepared quickly. Lady Siluria waits and walks away as Javier places the letter on the ground. After some time, they all sit in a carriage and head to Namaran. She inquires of Siluria Namaran whether she is a civil engineer. He confirms, stating there are a few types, and he will decide which to use after assessing the situation. She asks how he is aware of all the circumstances in their county. He explains that he simply inferred it from information gathered from others, given that Namaran is a city constructed on steep terrain, and it's natural for the sides to erode gradually. She expresses her gratitude for meeting him, even though they didn't marry as her father desired. He reassures her that he is pleased they can address the concerns that have plagued their family for generations. He considers the situation perfect, providing an opportunity to investigate Cannavaro and also earn some money through construction. He anticipates that this work trip will be productive, assuring others to wait for him as he plans to demonstrate the meaning of the phrase, "the first to strike wins." She observes Mr. Cannavaro, a business owner, using his own money to assist 400 refugees and consistently taking a prominent role in helping others even with small gestures. He gazes at a man selling bread, notices the logo on his shirt, and identifies him. Filled with anger, he considers him a hypocritical individual and vows to crush him like a crushed aluminum can, grinding his teeth in frustration. Count Namaran acknowledges that he must be tired from the long journey, praising the noble demeanor he exudes, foreseeing the Namaran family reaching even greater heights. He laughs as he approaches Javier, expressing the sentiment that, in light of the occasion, they should discuss a suitable day for the wedding. She responds, "Father, that's the bodyguard, Sir Javier, and Lord Lloyd is the person beside him." Count Namaran questions what she is saying, expressing confusion about the contrasting demeanor of the person on the left, overflowing with nobility, and the one on the right, who appears lacking in several aspects. She calls him rude and questions how a count like himself cannot recognize the true essence of a person. She acknowledges that Lord Lloyd may seem lacking in some aspects, but he is very wise and capable, emphasizing that he is not present for marriage matters. Her father wonders why Lord Lloyd is there, and she explains that he is there to help resolve the issue of their county's sidelands crumbling. Her father expresses relief, mentioning that he feared being embarrassed by his son-in-law's appearance. She addresses her father, expressing that his words are hurtful and inquiring if he can imagine the suffering Lord Lloyd may have endured receiving such treatment over time. She questions if Lord Lloyd is genuinely capable of stabilizing the slopes. Affirming her belief in his abilities, she suggests that they will provide the necessary manpower and materials, and he only needs to supervise the process. Her father raises concerns about the potential cost and the stability of the slopes. She reassures him, stating that if stabilization proves unsuccessful, she will compensate Lord Lloyd with 3 times the money spent on construction. Intrigued, her father looks at Lord Lloyd and requests details about the construction. Lord Lloyd, in anger, grabs Javier by the neck with his shovel. Confused and concerned, her father questions their actions, expressing a lack of understanding. They retire to their rooms for some rest that night. After some time, Baron Frontera inquires if Javier also observed the demon pattern on the shoulder of the individual in question. Javier confirms and specifies that it was a goat head. Lloyd declares that he will monitor Canavero. If they can establish that the pattern is linked to black magic and report the incident to Count Namaran, they can apprehend them all at once without taking direct action. Javier acknowledges his understanding of the plan. Lloyd questions why Javier looks so cheerful when discussing a serious matter. Javier apologizes, explaining that he was recalling the recent comment made by Count Namaran about him lacking in several aspects. Enraged, Lloyd attempts to punch Javier repeatedly, but Javier manages to evade every attack. The following morning, Baron Frontera ventures into the city and notices a gathering of people at a certain location. A person announces that everyone is free to choose anything, emphasizing that each piece is worth 200 copper, encouraging them to select whatever they desire. Observing this, Lloyd thinks, damn it, that pattern is being sold in the market, as he notices shirts with the particular pattern being offered for sale. Realizing the potential complications this presents, he becomes concerned. Javier addresses him as Master Lloyd, and he inquires if Javier found anything suspicious. Javier denies finding anything noteworthy, stating that all he observed was the individual sincerely helping the refugees. Javier adds that he intended to investigate the person's residence, but found it protected by an expensive magical lock. Although it would be easy to destroy it, he refrained from doing so, fearing immediate discovery. Javier explains that the pattern is meant to signify a wandering minstrel, as that individual is currently quite popular. He mentions that large cities are selling clothes featuring that pattern. He contemplates the necessity of finding the wandering minstrel and inquires about the process. However, he realizes that searching for the minstrel may jeopardize everything if Namaran's barrier is deployed in the meantime. Considering the lack of details in the novel regarding the magic used for the barrier, he acknowledges the difficulty in finding and preemptively stopping it. He ponders whether entrusting Javier to deal with the barrier is the only option despite the potential risk to Soluria's life. The thought of someone he knows dying is something he wishes to avoid. Recalling the term Grandmaster from the novel, he recognizes it as an entity surpassing even a sword master in power, a being capable of instantly eliminating the barrier and the Hell Knight. However, lacking knowledge of the theory, he acknowledges the impossibility of training Javier to become one. Javier suggests looking into Canavero, suspecting hidden secrets due to the powerful lock in use. Lloyd raises concerns about the risk of getting caught while breaking the lock. Javier reassures him, asserting that he has a reliable method to enter and guarantees success. Lloyd is urged to trust him and wait for him at their current location. Baron Frontera considers the necessity of anchors to prevent the slopes from collapsing, planning to drive them deep into the ground to fortify the terrain. He originally intended to use the shape of a wedge lock bolt. However, the challenge lies in the need for more technology to create an intricate helix. He dispatches a messenger pigeon carrying a message. He decides to send the blueprint to Corgidus first, realizing it will take some time to reach him. During this period, he anticipates that Corgidus will scrutinize and study the terrain. Lloyd steps outside and observes 2 people conversing while walking. One of them asks if the other also saw the new beauty at the distribution station. The other confirms, stating that everyone rushed over to catch a glimpse of her face. The first person exclaims about her exceptional body, and the second person agrees, noting that her physique is indeed attractive. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera eavesdrops on their conversation, questioning why they would discuss such matters in the middle of the street for everyone to hear. He learns about a beauty running a distribution station in Cannavaro, a detail not present in the novel, considering it might be one of the variables that he should investigate. Observing the crowd gathered to see the beauty, he decides to check it out. As he maneuvers through the crowded place, he apologizes and tries to move forward. People in the crowd express admiration for the beauty's body. To his surprise, he spots Javier transformed into a girl and selling something. Recognizing Javier, he uses sign language to convey his respect for Javier's preferences. Javier responds in sign language, clarifying that it's not a fetish but a part of his operation. Lloyd looks at him once more before walking away. Javier gazes at Cannavaro, who whispers about the progress of the preparations. The vegetable seller responds that they completed all of them last night, and then Cannavaro walks away. After a while, Lloyd Frontera reaches a high mountain and attempts to climb it. He plans to inspect the expected rupture line first, but he notices a skeleton's head there. He wonders what the bone is and questions if someone died there in the middle of the construction work. He dismisses the idea, realizing it has been recently buried, and examines the skeleton's details with his powers. Looking around, he wonders where the body is and why only the skull is visible. He discovers another skeleton's head and thinks there is one more over there. All three of them are buried 50 centimeters into the ground as he measures the distance through his skills. He ponders if it could be a deliberate occurrence, as the distance between each skull is exactly the same, suggesting they have been buried around the peak. On the other side, Cannavaro and his team members gather for a meeting, and he commends everyone, expressing satisfaction with their efforts. He asserts that their grand plans will unfold as scheduled. Lloyd Frontera observes dark magical waves emanating from the skull and realizes that black magic has been cast on the skull. This black magic is what will activate Namuran's barrier. On the other side, Cannavaro wickedly smiles and declares their actions are for the descent of the Hell Knight. Lloyd Frontera becomes enraged, stating that their plans are jeopardized. He absorbs the skull's powers and purifies them, noting the successful purification of one skull. He holds the purified skull in his hands and contemplates its significance. A gemstone emerges from the skull, leading him to believe that the skulls served as containers, and this gemstone appears to be the actual item for the sorcery. Holding it, he questions whether it is some jewel and proceeds to scan it. He ponders what this is as he notices an estimated value of 5 million for the jewel. He calculates that it is equivalent to Sir Bayern's annual salary. Wondering if the other buried skulls also have such jewels, he begins digging. Amused, he laughs and exclaims at the unexpected windfall, finding money in the places he excavates. The message window points out his heightened excitement, remarking on his focus being more on obtaining money than preventing the barrier's deployment. He dismisses the notion of the barrier, declaring it as money, free money. The message window responds with information about a skill level up, specifically the Asrahan Core Technique Triple Circle Level 3. He calculates a total of 30 and concludes that he now possesses the power of 30 Barons. As he fills a bag with jewels, he realizes it cannot contain the wealth. Delighted, he contemplates having enough money to make 30 Barons his slaves. He remembers that Baron often coughs excessively, prompting him to say, "Please rest for some time. He's overworking himself." He exclaims, "Damn, that was so satisfying," and decides to raise Baron's salary a little, planning to make him work for 20 years. In doing so, he believes Baron will accomplish the equivalent of 30 years' worth of work during that time, and he chuckles at the idea. Moving to another skull, he questions how it ended up being used for such sorcery, pondering whether it met a natural death or was a result of murder. Regardless of the circumstances, he expresses gratitude for the blessings, bowing in front of the skull. Holding it in his hand, he promises to take it to a place filled with sunlight, hoping it can now rest in peace. He proceeds to gather all the skulls in a bag. Lloyd Frontera and Javier sit in their room at night, and Javier explains the reason he was dressed in a particular way. However, Lloyd refuses, claiming he already knows it all. He asserts that all humans are diverse, and not everyone can be understood because everyone has their own preferences. Lloyd adds that he understands Javier's unique preferences. Javier mentions that the entire city is aware he is a knight from a foreign land and needs to disguise himself to gather more details. Lloyd reassures him, stating that he already knows everything. Curious, Lloyd asks when Javier discovered his preferences, prompting Javier to shout that it's not the case. Confused, Lloyd questions why Javier is getting angry and whether having such preferences is bad. He wonders if Javier is looking down on everyone in the world who shares that preference. In response, Javier says that, regardless, he managed to enter the mansion on an errand while working at the distribution point. Meanwhile, he responds, "Is that so? Did he find anything beneath the mansion? There was another door that led underground." Javier explains that initially when he observed Cannavaro, he believed there could be no one kinder and more diligent than him. He continues, stating that's why he considered it a mistake to suspect Cannavaro. However, upon discovering hidden layers of doors, he acknowledges that his instincts were right this time. Javier asserts that he will obtain the evidence no matter what he has to do. He replies, "All right, this is why he should trust his words and be proud of his preferences." Javier insists that he is trying to convey that's not the case. On the other side, Cannavaro angrily declares that all the Nectanium has disappeared. One of his team members reports that someone took every single one of them, while another mentions that this development has spoiled their grand plans. Cannavaro contemplates whether someone knew of his plans, but dismisses the idea, thinking that if that were the case, they would have come after him. He taps his hand on the table in frustration, realizing it might have been discovered by coincidence. An old man expresses his anger, questioning what Cannavaro plans to do, emphasizing that everyone gathered there because he assured them nothing would go wrong with the plan. Another person, with a scarred face, mentions that they invested a considerable amount of money based on his promise that the dark sorcerers would recreate the world, urging him to take responsibility for the situation. Cannavaro attempts to calm them down, urging them not to worry. He claims to have a plan and mentions that Nectanium serves as a substitute item for emergency situations. He reassures them that if everyone cooperates just this last time, the descent of the Hell Knight will proceed as planned. After a while, a water bucket falls on Javier, prompting another girl to exclaim, "Goodness, Miss Javier, what happened to him?" Javier explains that his hand just slipped. The girl suggests that Javier should go and change his clothes in the guest room that Sir Cannavaro has in his mansion, adding that all the men are staring at her. Javier agrees and says all right, while the men look at him and comment on her impressive body. Javier reaches the guest room and requests the guard to open the gate. The guard, impressed by her body, responds with admiration. Javier enters the guest house and changes clothes, thinking that he should be able to move around with ease now. To control his mana and fully hide his presence, he decides to let go. He jumps out of the window, moves forward stealthily, thinks about the door leading to basement level 2, and wonders how he can open that door. He gazes at Cannavaro and performs a magic spell, creating circles at the lock of the door, and successfully opens it. Javier considers that it's a different lock compared to the main gate, and it can only be opened by a certain sequence of mana. Meanwhile, Baron Frontera examines the bag of jewels and wonders if this is really all, speculating that there might be more buried in another location. He contemplates the possibility of activating Namoran's barrier with those jewels and resolves not to let it happen, deciding to search for more free money. The message window advises against using them for black magic tools, but Lloyd sees it as an opportunity for free money. Cannavaro enters the room, and Javier watches him closely. Javier follows behind and checks the room's lock. Using his magical circle magic, he believes it's definitely something like this and successfully unlocks the door. He enters as well and descends the stairs, encountering a long hallway where an undead charges towards him with the intent to attack. Javier counterattacks, delivering a punch that creates a hole in the undead's body, but it has no effect. The undead retaliates with a punch of its own, leading Javier to realize that it's not a normal undead. It operates on a completely different level compared to the ones he encountered in the valley. Seeing numerous undead approaching, he quickly retrieves small fork-like knives from his pocket and skillfully employs his abilities, confirming his suspicions about Cannavaro. Javier prepares to confront the undead, while behind them, a bald person stands at another gate, enters, and closes the door. Javier thinks the person looks like someone words could work on. He attacks the undead, slicing them into numerous pieces and breaking the wall in the process. He enters the room where the bald person went and throws him aside. The bald person pleads for mercy, and Javier mentions he has a question. He puts his foot on the person's leg, breaking it, causing him to cry out in pain. Javier warns that if there's even a moment's hesitation in the reply, the other leg will suffer the same fate. He asks about Cannavaro's schemes in this place. The bald person responds that he doesn't know the details. He's just following orders as an undertaker hired by Mr. Fall Cannavaro. He explains that he processes the corpses brought by Cannavaro through chemical means and is suddenly instructed to guard the place. Javier inquires about the source of the corpses, causing the bald person to become scared. The person explains that the corpses come from the trading post, where they send the bodies of refugees who died from illnesses. Javier remembers his plan to move his father to the trading post for treatment, feeling grateful for the potential improvement in his father's health. She expresses her thanks with a bow, and Javier thinks about the corpses, the skulls with jewels that Master Lloyd Frontera discovered, and all the undead he has cut down. Javier questions whether the bald person found it strange that the trading post kept sending corpses here. He declares the person an accomplice, breaking the person's other leg. Javier moves quickly, anticipating the discovery of their underground room. He considers the urgency of informing Master Lloyd and devising a countermeasure against their actions. After a while, Javier arrives home and calls Master Lloyd, realizing he has no time to waste searching for him. He takes his sword and quickly heads out, determining that he must make a decision and take action. He decides to attack Cannavaro by himself, thinking about Cannavaro and the others who discussed things he couldn't understand, speculating that they were all from the trading post. Believing the trading post to be their base, he breaks a window to enter and looks around, finding it empty. He concludes that the trading post, once filled with people, is now vacant, making him suspect that they have initiated some undisclosed activity. Entering a room, he encounters a black magic cloud, feeling a sudden weakness as if his strength is draining rapidly. Puzzled by the situation, he goes outside and observes a black magic cloud shield enveloping the entire city. His sword also loses its powers, and he realizes that mana is rapidly being drained from everyone. People collapse to the ground, and he worries about Master Lloyd, fearing for his safety. Siluria Namoran looks out of a window, witnessing people dying. She rushes to go outside, unsure of what is happening but determined to help. The person with a scar on their face stands outside the city, casting a magic spell and believing that the Nictanium and the spell given by Cannavaro are effective. They anticipate the descent of the Hell Knight upon the city, leading to the world becoming theirs. Despite this conviction, the person wonders about the mysterious identity of the guy involved in these events. Lloyd Frontera approached him and suggested that he ask a question. Upon looking around, he observed approximately 30 people dressed similarly to himself, and wondered if they were engaging in a ritual for rain or some other purpose. Despite this, he continued with his magic spell. Growing frustrated, Lloyd Frontera inquired why his question was being ignored. He questioned whether he was currently being treated as if he were invisible. The thought crossed his mind that he might have scared the individual, considering how unattractive he appeared. He reasoned that he mustn't move at this moment, as any slight movement of his mouth could ruin everything. As he walked away, Lloyd Frontera decided to treat him as an invisible person and determined to see how long he could feign ignorance. While attempting to strike the person with a scar using his shovel, it unexpectedly turned, resulting in a crack. Undeterred, the person with the scar smiled, prompting him to realize that the magical protection of steel cast by Cannavaro was in effect, rendering a mere shovel ineffective. Realizing the situation, he unleashed his powers, attacking with fire and causing the person with the scar to become frightened. Lloyd Frontera examines his shovel. The person with the scar considers how foolish it is, noting that the magic's defense power is absolute, and Lloyd won't even be able to scratch it. The person comments that Lloyd seems quite confident, but must be in a lot of pain at the moment. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, the person acknowledges that things are not going according to plan and emphasizes the need to remain calm. Moving his hand towards his badge, the person contemplates whether absorbing mana, as he did last time, would be effective. As he starts to absorb mana, his hand begins to burn. He questions whether Lloyd will not move or cannot move, pondering the potential consequences of the barrier if he does. Engaging in deep thought, he formulates a plan. Lloyd Frontera interrupts, stating that there's no need to reply because he intends to test it out regardless. The black magic spell begins to spread all around. Meanwhile, at Namoran Town Hall, Mr. Cannavaro walks into the hall, causing many people to fall to the floor unconscious. A person catches his foot and pleads for help. Mr. Cannavaro dismissively calls him vermin and kicks him in the mouth. He notices a statue in front of him and declares that the statue of the fallen angel will become a gate for the Hell Knight's descent. He then cuts his finger and points his blood on the statue. Simultaneously, Lloyd Frontera throws mud around and announces that preparations are complete. He digs a hole around the person with a scar and creates a makeshift table for him to stand on. The person with the scar starts sweating due to fear. Lloyd Frontera approaches, making different voices to intensify the scare tactics. The mud table breaks and he falls down, causing his mana to start exploding, and he screams no. Eventually, he becomes unconscious. Lloyd Frontera takes the badge from his shirt and reflects on how this seems to be quite a complex and elaborate spell, realizing that it backfires as soon as the user moves in such a case. He observes the surroundings, noting the palace covered with a black magic spell, and thinks nice. Meanwhile, Mr. Cunning Canavero stands near the statue, contemplating who it is. Despite insufficient mana, he must finish the summoning right away. He reads some spells. Siluria Namaran arrives and asks what on earth he is trying to do. He looks at her and considers whether a magic charm that blocks the loss of mana is the reason she can walk normally within the barrier. He employs his fire magic, hurling it towards her, and asserts that it's still useless. She, in turn, employs her powers and halts the fire using her fire magic. Growing irritated, he sees her and gathers all his fire magic power, declaring punishment of the fire god. She attacks him with fire, but he deploys a protection shield to defend himself. An explosion occurs, spreading black dust. She approaches him and demands an explanation, asking what he is attempting to do there. He responds by uttering some spells. Shocked by his actions, she inquires further. He continues by saying, "Descend upon them, Hell Knight." The statue begins to break. She looks at him in disbelief, asking if he is a Hell Knight. He takes his sword and moves to attack. Javier also arrives with his master's sword, attacking and shattering the statue. Mr. Cane Canavero is shocked to witness this turn of events. Canavero attacks Javier, but Javier counterattacks and cuts his hand. A bright flash emanates from the statue's eye, capturing Javier's attention as an explosion ensues. Everyone takes cover to shield themselves from the statue's fragments. Siluria Namaran utilizes her skill as Earth God's shield, effectively protecting the people of her city. Javier grips his sword and prepares for another attack. Cannavaro, now frightened, declares that it's all over, referring to Javier as vermin. He predicts that everyone present will burn to death and have their limbs ripped apart at the hands of the Hell Knight. He laughs maniacally as a demonic hand materializes behind him, summoning a giant monster wielding a huge sword. Cannavero looks at Javier and wonders what's happening. He questions the whereabouts of the war horse of hell and why Javier doesn't have any legs. Javier curses, pondering whether there was not enough mana due to Namaran's barrier disappearing, and speculates if rushing the summoning in that state caused the issue. He contemplates the possibility of defeating the Hell Knight, even though it's not in its complete form. Xerixius inquires what the summoner desires. Cannavero accuses the silver-haired man of daring to point his sword towards him. Xerixius charges to attack Javier with his sword, while Javier attempts to stop the onslaught. He realizes that the impact reverberates throughout all his bones, rendering the full body strengthening achieved through a mix of aura and mana useless. Xerixius forcefully pushes him back and launches another attack, but Siluria Namaran uses her skill to counter Xerixius, while Javier steps back from the ongoing assault. Xerixius questions who dares to intervene and charges Siluria Namaran. Observing this, Javier becomes infuriated, channels all his mana force, and launches a powerful attack on Xerixius just as he is about to strike Siluria Namaran. She becomes frightened and closes her eyes, and Javier successfully cuts off his head, causing him to collapse on the ground. Javier gazes at the lifeless body of Xerixius, which transforms into ashes. Cannavero expresses disbelief, stating that it's impossible. Javier points his sword towards him and acknowledges Siluria, thanking her for his victory. He requests her to move everyone to a place where they can rest. She agrees, saying she'll attend to it. Arcos Frontera urges Javier to help support the others if he has any strength left and suggests moving to the Count's mansion quickly. He emphasizes the need to hurry up. Javier asserts that they will discuss the details of the incident in the palace, acknowledging that, regardless of the circumstances, he won't be able to evade execution. Cannavero retorts, claiming he knows nothing and referring to Javier as a brat, asserting that he doesn't understand the significance of an existence from hell. Meanwhile, the monster reappears from the ashes, once again wielding his sword. Cannavaro laughs, stating that no matter how many times Javier cuts him down, it's useless because the great Hell Knight is undying. Xerixius admits that he thought Javier was strong in their initial clash, expressing surprise at discovering his true strength. He apologizes for underestimating Javier's abilities and not paying enough attention. Identifying himself as Xerixius, the first corps captain serving the ruler of Hell, he suggests that they now decide the true victor in this situation. Javier identifies himself as Javier Asrahan, a knight of Frontera, and declares his intention to send Xerixius back to where he came from. They both prepare for the impending fight. Xerixius swiftly runs and closes the distance to Javier, catching him off guard, and Javier becomes frightened unexpectedly. They engage in a battle, each attempting to defeat the other, while Xerixius expresses his surprise and finds the situation entertaining. Xerixius initiates an attack on Javier, who successfully blocks the assault and throws him away. Undeterred, Xerixius charges once more to attack Javier, and they engage in repeated exchanges. Javier contemplates the situation, noting that Xerixius' sword technique lacks finesse. Despite merely swinging his sword around, it proves challenging for Javier to dodge, prompting him to search for an opening to counterattack. In an attempt to create such an opportunity, Javier throws his dagger towards Xerixius, who promptly catches it. Javier reflects on the limitations imposed by his injured legs, realizing that, despite various potential movements, being on the ground leaves him with only one option. Xerixius disappears, leaving Javier to ponder where he might reappear. Aware of the need to anticipate and prepare for Xerixius' movements, Javier readies himself for the next encounter. Meanwhile, Xerixius' sword emerges from the ground, and he resurfaces. However, Javier, having spotted him in time, counterattacks, commanding him to die. Swiftly, Xerixius seizes Javier's leg, causing him to lose balance. Javier wonders if Xerixius is attempting to fling him, considering using mana reinforcement, but the flowing mana from Xerixius seems to block his own. He throws Javier to the ground, lifts him again, and repeats the action, prompting Javier to shout in pain. Xerixius remarks that it has been enjoyable, acknowledging Javier's honorable name and expressing the intention to remember it. He raises his sword, suggesting they fight again in hell, nearly stabbing Javier. Lloyd Frontera arrives, addressing him as Skeleton Head, and commands him to stop. Lloyd informs him that, based on what he knows, the Skeleton Head must return to hell if his summoner dies. Lloyd points his shovel towards Cannavaro, warning him to move away from his knight on the count of 3, or he'll decapitate Cannavaro. He screams in fear. He contemplates the identity of the intimidating individual before him, noting the terrifying appearance and the absence of bluffing. He acknowledges the potential threat, recognizing the otherworldly feeling emanating from the mysterious figure. Xerixius inquires about the newcomer's origin, questioning if he is from hell based on his appearance and manner of speech. Lloyd Frontera initiates a countdown, pressing his shovel against Xerixius' neck. In response, Xerixius unleashes a powerful magic spell, prompting Lloyd to swiftly dodge, resulting in the spell hitting Cannavaro instead. He remarks that as long as Cannavaro is still breathing, everything is acceptable. Even in the event of his death, he claims it would take only 40 minutes to perform a reverse summon, allowing him to easily devastate the city. Lloyd Frontera reflects on the failure of his strategy and contemplates his next move. Meanwhile, Javier rises once again, attempting to attack Xerixius from behind. However, he senses his presence and hurls him away. Observing the situation, Lloyd Frontera realizes that Javier is already groggy. He shouts at Javier to fight, instructing him to stay down and emphasizing that it's an order. Lloyd calls out to Xerixius from behind as he moves towards Javier. Javier believes that with Lloyd's arrival, victory is now possible, and he is determined to achieve it no matter what. Lloyd Frontera addresses him, verbally abusing him while utilizing his mana fire powers to launch an attack. Xerixius, however, blocks the attack and redirects it back towards Lloyd. Reacting swiftly, Lloyd sidesteps, causing an explosion behind him. Seizing the opportunity, Xerixius readies his sword to attack. Unexpectedly, Lloyd Frontera comes from behind and tightly grabs him. He warns Lloyd, calling him a fool, and explains the consequences of touching a being from hell. He asserts that the mana tainted with darkness will contaminate Lloyd's heart, leading to his demise. In response, Lloyd Frontera expresses his acknowledgement, deeming it quite frightening. Nevertheless, he states that he has already purified the black mana multiple times. Xerixius is perplexed, wondering about Lloyd's identity. A message window informs him that the mana flowing from the Hell Knight has temporarily strengthened his mana heart. The message continues, stating that, although he is still not a match for the Hell Knight, at this very moment, the Hell Knight won't be able to ignore him. Another message window notifies him that the special Lloyd human lock has been activated, prompting Lloyd to tighten his grip even further and laugh. Lloyd Frontera maintains his grip on Xerixius as Xerixius attempts to hit him with his face and toss him away. However, Lloyd swiftly seizes Xerixius's legs, throws him to the ground, and then tightens his hold on Xerixius's neck, laughing loudly. As Javier prepares to attack again, Xerixius questions if he needs to remember something. Observing this, Xerixius thinks that Javier has already recovered from the earlier damage and realizes he needs to block the imminent attack. Javier strikes Xerixius's chest, causing him to shout in pain and step back quickly. Despite the attack, Lloyd Frontera still maintains his grip on Xerixius. Seeing Javier running towards them for another attack, Xerixius wonders why Javier is still clinging to him, given that he is currently teleporting. Lloyd Frontera questions why Xerixius has his armor and sword with him, advising him to discard them and criticizing him for finding faults. Javier runs in for another attack, and Lloyd Frontera, observing the situation, notes that Javier is moving faster than ever before, but still struggles to match the mobility provided by teleportation. Approaching his limits and attempting to purify the blackish mana, Lloyd Frontera frets about the possibility of losing at this rate and contemplates his next move. A message window prompts him to activate Messenger Contract Clause 37, Paragraph 1. Puzzled by the sudden request, he receives a notification indicating that the request has been approved. The system further informs him that under Clause 37, Paragraph 1, the messenger is capable of providing personal advice to the individual in charge of it. Another notification suggests sing Kim Soo Ho. If he sings, he'll be able to win. Confused by the idea of singing, Javier charges to attack with his magical circle spell. In response, Lloyd Frontera begins to sing, "Is someone who was born to be loved." Perplexed by the unconventional approach, he describes the sensation as akin to someone scratching his brain with an iron nail. He reflects, concluding that his singing is indeed just normal, and he simply cannot sing well despite being loved. Xerixius shouts for him to stop singing. Undeterred, Lloyd Frontera continues to sing, choosing to sing about having peace like river water. He observes that it seems to be working, as demons are evidently weak against him. Confused, Javier puts his hands over his ears. Reflecting on his own singing abilities, Lloyd Frontera realizes that even his parents, who were always kind to him, had asked him never to sing in front of others. Recalling a singing class practical test where he sang only one note of O Sol Mio, he remembers his music teacher lifting the organ and throwing it at him, insisting that he should skip class if he didn't want to participate. Recalling his time in the army, he remembers joining a church service that distributed chocolate pies and involved him singing. During one service, the pastor declared the appearance of a demon and threw holy water at him. Reflecting on the notion that no skills in this world are useless, even being tone deaf is considered beneficial, he continues singing about surging love. In response, Xerixius attacks, commanding him to die and go to hell, labeling him a demon. Meanwhile, Javier uses magical circles around his ears while listening to Lloyd's song expressing surging love. Despite Xerixius's attempts to throw him away, Javier remains close and charges to attack. Lloyd Frontera releases his grip on Xerixius, causing him to fall to the ground. Lloyd exclaims hallelujah, and at that moment, Javier quickly stabs Xerixius using an aura blast, resulting in the destruction of everything around them. Lloyd Frontera breathes heavily, and Javier appears tired as well. He comments that he won't utter phrases like "did they get rid of him?" since, in his experience, the other person always manages to survive. Javier asserts that it's not over and urges everyone to closely observe the mana in their vicinity. They notice Xerixius's shadow and his mana waves around them. Javier requests everyone to stand back. Despite the warning, Lloyd Frontera smiles and reassures him that it's fine, stating that Xerixius won't survive. He questions if Javier is serious about making such a statement after witnessing the recent blast going through Xerixius's head. Lloyd Frontera adds that he is willing to bet that the vote for his survival is already lost. Lloyd Frontera retrieves his shovel from the ground and proposes a bet. If he survives, he'll serve as Lloyd's subordinate for a year. If he doesn't survive, Xerixius must dress up as Javiella when they return to their country. Javier agrees, urging Lloyd to stop approaching. The bet is on, and Javier launches 3 constructive blasts, attacking Xerixius with his skills. Observing the situation, Javier wonders if Xerixius is absorbing the Hell Knight's mana. He asserts that there's no way he can handle absorbing such immense mana. He coughs and vomits blood, contemplating whether his plan worked. Despite the overwhelming amount and strength of the mana, he considers it the only available solution and wonders who will emerge victorious in the end. Employing his skill once more with full force, Xerixius laughs, suggesting that Javier can likely sense his impending defeat. Meanwhile, Xerixius falls to a lower position, bleeding. Javier and Siluria approach him, placing their hands on his back, and jointly attempt to heal him. Siluria employs her skill, the Blessing of Life, and they work together to provide complete healing. Absorbing Xerixius's mana, Baron Frontera declares their victory, prompting Xerixius to express his frustration with insults. As Lloyd successfully absorbs him, he announces the completion of the exorcism and then faints. Seeing this, Siluria addresses Sir Lloyd, expressing concern, while Javier reassures her not to worry, explaining that it's a form of victory ceremony that Lloyd always performs. Dismissing Javier's nonchalant attitude, Siluria insists that, as his escort knight, he should always be concerned, even if it has happened multiple times before. Although Javier claims to be worried, Siluria remarks that he doesn't appear worried at all and instructs him to quickly assist Lloyd. The system notifies him that he has defeated Xerixius, the core commander of Hell, and the King of Hell is amazed by this incredible feat, expressing a desire for him. He reflects on Canavero's arrest and transportation to prison by knights sent by the kingdom. 2 members of the Dark Sorcerer's party were captured, and the rest of the matter will be handled by the Queen. More significantly, he considers the major issue. The construction can't progress due to the barrier, leading to a loss of strength among the workers. Reflecting on the situation, he regrets not having anticipated this problem and arranged for workers from their own county when the anchor spell was cast. However, he acknowledges the need to find a solution and earn money without speaking negatively. Upon waking up after being unconscious for a few days, he is certain that he has gained some incredible skills. The system informs him that, due to absorbing a part of his power, the option Undead Domination within his mana skill has been upgraded into an individual skill. He questions whether the various limitations and requirements of the undead skill have been deleted, realizing that if he possesses the undead, he could potentially have free labor. With a smile, he considers this development as an awesome jackpot. The message window then notifies him of gaining a new title, Demon-Possessed Atrocious Singer, presented as a compliment. He reacts skeptically, questioning the sincerity of the compliment and pondering the practicality of the new skill. He wonders if it's merely a pleasant-sounding feature, or if it possesses actual utility. Reflecting on what would be more beneficial, he contemplates having a power related to hell, imagining the manifestation of hell mana from his eyes as he looks in the mirror. He remarks on how big and cool his eye appears, relishing the sight. Simultaneously, someone knocks at his door, prompting him to turn and face the door. Inquiring about the visitor's identity, he proceeds to the door and repeats the question, wondering why there is no response. Upon opening the door, he is surprised to find numerous undeads standing outside. Puzzled, he asks who they are, prompting them to attempt an answer. Upon closer inspection, he finds their appearance unsettling and comments on the grossness of their eyes. One of the undead apologizes and presents a card explaining that they are ghosts who lost their bodies due to hell sorcery. They were wandering around when they sensed a power that could grant them a physical form, leading them to come to his location. Observing them with his hell mana eye, he considers the possibility. They affirm that it's correct and express gratitude towards him, acknowledging that thanks to him, they have acquired new bodies. They convey their appreciation once again, stating that meeting him in person has confirmed that he is the one who pacified their vengeful spirits. Recalling that he buried all the skulls he found on the mountain and prayed for them, they reveal that they lack memories of their past lives and have no purpose. They fear that if they disperse and wander aimlessly, they might eventually be exorcised. To demonstrate their sincerity, they all bow down in front of him and earnestly request him to take them in, offering a chance to repay his kindness. In response, he forewarns them of the significant amount of work he'll be assigning and inquires about the need for a salary. They assert that being spirits, they have no need for money. He inquires about what they need for sustenance, and they respond that they don't possess a digestive system. When he asks about a place for them to live, they suggest providing them with a 10 cubic meter coffin. Smiling, he agrees, declaring them as members of Frontera County's workers, specifically the Skeleton Worker Squad. They express their gratitude, and he laughs, reveling in the realization of the free labor he has always dreamed of. Excitement fills the air, with both him and the newly enlisted Skeleton Workers Squad sharing in the thrill. Meanwhile, Javier looks at him with annoyance, thinking that he no longer cares about what he does. He hugs Bengal and settles down to sleep in a chair. Lloyd Frontera elucidates the unparalleled work capabilities of the Ghost Skeleton Worker Squad, emphasizing their ceaseless productivity, lack of fatigue, absence of sleep, disinterest in food, and the notable fact that they don't require wages. He recounts an incident where Count Namaran, having regained his energy, fainted upon visiting the construction site. Lloyd Frontera, emanating light from his eye, proudly declares these workers as labor spirits, underscoring his identity as a skilled summoner. He challenges anyone who doubts this ability, pointing out the distinctive eye that becomes visible when he opens it widely. Count Namaran expresses skepticism, noting the rarity of a genius summoner and highlighting that he has never encountered an instance of eyes shining in such a manner. Lloyd Frontera responds by questioning why someone like Miss Siluria can be recognized as a magic genius while he is not, and why fires can emanate from her eyes, but not from his. He issues an apology. Lloyd Frontera reflects that lies can be acceptable as long as they cause no harm, expressing a lack of concern about their morality. The message box alerts that this line of thinking appears perilous. Winter arrives, bringing with it the falling snow, and the completed anchors have arrived, marking the final stage of the slope stabilization construction of Namaran just before its completion. Javier sits atop the mountain, feeling the snow, and a memory surfaces where Miss Siluria once touched his hand. Examining his hand, he is interrupted as Miss Siluria approaches from behind, addressing him. He inquires about the progress of the construction, suggesting that detailed reports should be discussed with Master Lloyd. However, she clarifies that her purpose is to see him. He questions the reason for her visit and what she requires. She explains her stagnation in mana utilization, and witnessing his ability to control mana freely, she believes that learning this method could enhance her magic. He agrees to teach her everything he knows, eliciting joy from her. Meanwhile, Lloyd Frontera turns back to observe the interaction. Sometime later, he reflects on a memory where Miss Siluria lies unconscious in his hands. He contemplates that revenge was sought upon him for killing the monster, and he believes that anyone who seeks his help should leave. Frustrated, he curses and labels Javier as a cursed mana individual, convinced that he is destined to have no companions. He resigns himself to fighting alone repeatedly until exhaustion takes over and he succumbs to death. Determined not to let anyone into his heart, he acknowledges that his heart could lead others to their demise, attributing his boundless strength to a fate imposed upon him. Subsequently, Lloyd Frontera announces the flawless completion of the slope construction, assuring that regular maintenance will eliminate any concerns. He expresses gratitude for the construction payment, which surpasses the initial agreement. Count Namaran responds by stating that it's insufficient, asserting that there is more to be done. He instructs everyone to acknowledge their territory's benefactor, and the crowd collectively rises with a slogan of appreciation. He believes he has earned a substantial amount of money, is highly excited, and will indeed be able to indulge in leisure activities upon his return. Count Namaran suggests one more thing for the last time, asking how about becoming his son-in-law and inheriting Namaran. He firmly declines, stating that he is destined to be the king of his territory. He bows down and requests forgiveness for repeatedly rejecting the proposal, emphasizing that he is the heir of the Frontera family and Namaran already possesses an exceptional heir. He mentions the individual who will soon become the continent's greatest mage, Miss Siluria. He states that they will now take their leave. Count Namaran expresses gratitude, emphasizing that he won't forget the help for the rest of his life. Miss Siluria and Javier make eye contact with affection. Lloyd Frontera calls Javier, who responds affirmatively. Lloyd Frontera suggests that he stay here, assuring him of a higher salary and more excellent prospects for success in life. Javier inquires if he has lost his mind after absorbing poisonous mana, stating that they were already peculiar to begin with. Lloyd Frontera questions what he just said. Javier asserts that he is a knight of the Frontera family and will remain so for the rest of his life until he dies. Lloyd Frontera poses a hypothetical scenario, asking what if he commanded him to do so. Javier declares that he won't comply and requests execution. Lloyd Frontera acknowledges the stubbornness and suggests they depart. After a while, Erox Fronter informs Marbella that Lloyd Frontera is back and suggests they go meet him outside. They both run toward the door and see Lloyd Frontera approaching with many headless skeletons. Lloyd Frontera explains that these entities are known as the spirits of labor, summoned through his summon magic. Erox Frontera expresses acceptance, indicating that he is not surprised by what Lloyd has brought back, but inquires about Javier. He observes Javier standing there in a girl's costume. Javier reflects that he agreed to that foolish bet while he was out of sorts. Lloyd Frontera points at Javier and states that if that individual survives, he will serve as his subordinate for a year. If he does not survive, then he is to dress up as Javiella when they return to their country, and Lloyd asks how that sounds. Erox Frontera hugs and mentions that it must have been hard for him to stay inside the closet all this while. Javier insists that's not what this is. Erox reassures him, stating it's okay and not a bad thing. He is just a little different. Javier once again asserts that's not what this is. Lloyd Frontera laughs at him, hugs his parents, and thinks he is so happy to have come back home with peace of heart. The workers unload the items from the cart. He contemplates having a substantial amount of money that will allow him to do nothing but play for the rest of his life, finally achieving a state of idleness. Suddenly, the royal messenger arrives and announces the royal order. He states that Lloyd Frontera is ordered to be a part of the special envoy departing to Isfahan. Lloyd Frontera exclaims, "What?" The messenger clarifies that he is to leave immediately. Soldiers dress him and hold him, initiating the process of dragging him away. After a while, the caravan of the Queen passes through their way. Lloyd Frontera sits sadly inside the cart. Javier places his hand on his head and advises him not to cry, stating it's too ugly. Lloyd asks how he is supposed not to cry. Delegation Captain Count Ventura inquires why he looks so upset when he has just received an honorable mission from the Queen. Lloyd expresses that he feels so honored that his tears cannot stop flowing, and he wonders why he would go there. He questions why she sent him there. He wishes to go home. He hates her. The scene shifts to a flashback. Queen Alicia Termina Magentano asks the reason why she chose Lloyd Frontera to be in the delegation. Count Ventura agrees, acknowledging that while Lloyd contributed significantly in the aftermath of the losses incurred due to the monsters, he is unsure how that would make him an excellent diplomatic official. He expresses his query due to his lack of wisdom. She clarifies that being a diplomatic official has nothing to do with that. Count Ventura asks why she would choose him. She assures him of one thing: from the moment he receives the order to become an envoy, he will cry and create a huge fuss. She explains that this is because his dream of living a carefree life in a quiet corner of the kingdom will be destroyed. She adds that the report she received regarding the Namoran incident stated that the Knights of Namarana had defeated the Hell Knight. She asserts that Lloyd and his escort knight simply gathered information and provided it to them, considering it nonsense. Even if the summon was incomplete, it's not an entity that mere knights can defeat. She is confident that Lloyd and his knight were the ones who beat it, and must have asked Count Namoran to keep their actual involvement a secret. She suggests that Count Namoran might have just written a line because he could not do that, describing Lloyd as the kind of man who is not interested in success or fame. He simply wants to indulge in leisure activities. She concludes that's why she is certain he will definitely bring back results, as he easily bears grudges and is a materialistic person who's constantly charming. He wonders if she's complimenting him or insulting him. She advises that even if he looks like he's about to die, they should leave him be, and he'll understand eventually after weighing out the pros and cons. She predicts that he will realize that Samarkand has something he wants. The scene shifts back to the present. Lloyd Frontera continues to cry. Count Ventura observes that he doesn't seem like someone who understands anything, and he can't bring himself to like this man who is so materialistic, only desiring money and ignoring honor. Meanwhile, a soldier kneels down in front of Samarkand and respectfully addresses him as the great and all-powerful Sultan. He informs Samarkand that Magentano's delegation will soon arrive at the place. Samarkand instructs him to ensure that they receive the treatment they deserve. After a while, Count Ventura arrives at the palace and inquires if there isn't a mistake here. They are the envoys of Magentano. He questions if they are genuinely suggesting that this is their accommodation and whether it's acceptable to be this disrespectful to diplomatic officials. A well-dressed man responds that there's no mistake. They simply followed the orders of the all-powerful Samarkand. Count Ventura asserts that they will see Samarkand immediately and then bring them to him. He informs him that Samarkand is currently busy with state matters, so he won't be able to grant them an audience. Count Ventura asks how long they need to wait in such a place. He replies that he's not sure, but at least 6 months. Count Ventura exclaims, asking what nonsense that is. He presents him with a necklace and explains that if he dislikes the accommodations, he can use this patashira to find better lodging. As long as he possesses this patashir in Isfahan, he will receive the blessings and grace of the all-powerful Samarkand. Count Ventura questions if he is treating the envoys of the Magentano kingdom like beggars. The man clarifies that he seems to misunderstand. It's an honor for him to be bestowed with this patashir. He throws the necklace on the floor and leaves, bidding them to have a good rest. Count Ventura becomes enraged, verbally abuses them, and asserts that they have gone too far in insulting their kingdom, essentially declaring it an act of war. The royal messenger inquires about what they should do. Count Ventura informs him that he has sent a letter back to their kingdom, requesting them to send a large delegation here. They must let the surrounding countries know about this fact to exert pressure on them. He mentions that he hasn't seen the young master of Frontera around anywhere for a while now. Count Ventura advises not to pay any attention to him, emphasizing that what's more important now is the whereabouts of the patashir that was on the ground just now. He asks where it went. After a while, a poor little girl holding a basket pleads, "Please buy some torches." They light up very quickly. A man becomes angry and retorts, "Don't get in his way, beggar." She sits in a corner, starts crying, and laments that she was not able to sell torches again today. She doesn't know where she should hide and sleep tonight. Lloyd Frontera arrives and asks if she is looking for a place to sleep. He offers to help her and invites her to come with him. After a while, Lloyd Frontera is walking with a little girl in the market. She states that this inn is the most expensive inn in the capital, and she cannot let him, someone she is meeting for the first time, do this for her. He laughs and informs her that she is mistaken. This inn is his, and he has just bought it. He shows her the papers and states that this is the title deed. She should sign here and take it. She inquires about his identity. He shows her the patashir necklace and states that he is someone who has been blessed with the grace of the all-powerful Samarkand. Displaying the patashir, he announces that he will be treating everyone to the most expensive meal in this restaurant, with him footing the bill. A person is shocked to see the patashir and remarks that it is the patashir that can buy anything. Another person mentions that it is their first time visiting it. Lloyd Frontera instructs them to call all their family members, relatives, and neighbors. Tonight, there shall be no hunger in this city. Everyone becomes excited. He emphasizes that they have the blessing of the all-powerful Samarkand. He goes to a shop and asks if this is the most expensive silk in this city. The shopkeeper responds that no, this is the most expensive silk in the whole world. He points out and specifies that in that case exclude those and give him everything else. After a while, he goes to the seaside. A healthy man asks if he wants to borrow a personal sailing boat. He shows patashir, points to a big ship, and states that no, he wants to buy it, and he will buy all the perfumes and condiments that are in this market. Please prepare to fill 6 of his sailing boats fully. He mentions that they will pass through Cremo and get to Frontera. All the other shopkeepers also display their items and request him to buy them too. A person asks if he does not need the sword. Lloyd Frontera replies, "Okay, please line up, and for the grace of the Samarkand, reach everyone." Just then, the soldiers arrive there, point at Lloyd Frontera, and say, "There he is, catch him." They apprehend Lloyd Frontera and Javer, tie them with rope, place swords on their necks, and present them in front of King Samarkand. He inquires if he is the person who spent a whole year's worth of the palace's budget. Lloyd Frontera identifies himself as Arcos Frontera's son, Lloyd Frontera, and he pays his respects to the great and all-powerful Samarkand. He looks at him and reflects that this is Lloyd Frontera who flipped the monster domino. This is what he was after. He realizes that Lloyd Frontera did all that so that he could meet him. He looks at him and thinks he needs to prevent a war from happening, as the border that their territory relies on will become a battlefield. He considers that if a war starts, the first person they will face is him, and even if the kingdom mobilizes its entire army to destroy the Frontera territory, he can't guarantee they will win. He ponders the unpredictable attack power and acknowledges that he does not know what secret operations might be underway. He contemplates whether he should kill him now. However, he sees Javier and decides against it, realizing that there's a bomb inside the palace. Even if he defeats this swordmaster, the capital city might turn to ash. Lloyd Frontera thinks deeply, considering that there might be another choice for the great Sultan Samar Khan besides talking. Samar Khan thinks, how dare he threaten him? He commands him to let him go.